welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and this is brought to you by the World Puja Network, and we very much appreciate being able to be on the World Puja Network again. Today I'm joined with Dr. Ted Loder, and he is Professor Emeritus at the University of New Hampshire and had worked in the Institute for Earth, Oceans, and Space there for most of his career, and is the science advisor to the Orion Project.org. And today we will be talking about new energy, free energy, and the energy crisis and what all of us can do to heal Gaia, Mother Earth. My name is Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm a medical doctor and founder of the Orion Project and also the Disclosure Project. And I dedicated my life over the last few years to finding solutions to the energy and environmental crisis, and also to disclosing information on illegally maintained covert programs that have been keeping a lot of this information from the public. This show is going to be a couple times a month now with conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and the next one will be with Linda Willits, and we'll be talking about higher states of consciousness and meditation and how higher states of consciousness can be used to interact with advanced interstellar civilizations who are visiting this planet. But today we want to focus on the OrionProject.org and the work it's doing, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Ted Loder to the show.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Well, I think that in terms of introducing this whole matter, I'd like to just say a couple things about what the Orion Project is. You know, we're in this enormous energy crisis. Everyone who goes to buy any gasoline knows this. And what we have done with the OrionProject.org is to start a nonprofit so that the people can contribute to real energy research. What we find is that there's so much going on that's in the news about alternative energy, but none of it's going into any solutions. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on silliness such as ethanol and biofuels, which are actually causing world food crisis and also cause more pollution than they solve. And we're spending enormous amounts, as of last year, about $100 billion in investments into solar and wind, but everyone recognizes while those are better than nothing, that's not where the real solutions need to come from. So what we want to focus on at the OrionProject.org are the very high-tech, physics-oriented electromagnetic systems that are going to give us an entirely new type of energy generation capability. And what everyone needs to understand is that we have those systems. These have already been developed in classified projects. I've worked with people who've worked in naval labs, who've worked in Lockheed Skunk Works, who've worked at Northrop and other corporations, where they have these systems that the taxpayers have paid for, but they have been illegally classified and kept from the public. And really, what we're talking about are very advanced energy systems that extract energy from the space around us, and there's a lot of ways of doing that. But to make it pretty simple, the public needs to understand that every cubic centimeter of space in the room where you're sitting right now has enough energy to run the Earth for a day if we could extract it, and this is called the zero-point energy field or the quantum vacuum flux field. But there are a lot of other breakthroughs that have happened over the years. It's not an urban myth that people have actually developed the electronics to get water from turned into a fuel by separating hydrogen and oxygen from the water. There have been people who've run vehicles on this so-called Brown's gas or hydroxy gas, and there are many other ways to solve the energy problem. The issue becomes what happens to these inventors and these inventions, and why don't they make their way out to the public? And so what the OrionProject.org wants to do is to involve all of us together in an effort to put together the best brain trust, the greatest minds that we can find to research this issue and bring out these solutions that are going to be the real solutions to the energy and environmental crisis. So that's sort of as a way of introduction. And I'd like to have Ted, if you could comment what exactly the OrionProject.org is working on right now, what sort of technologies that that we're focusing on, and that you as the science chief, along with Bill Costantino, who's one of our engineers and coordinators, have been developing.
Thank you, Steve. A couple comments before I dive into that. One of the problems that we've discovered, the Orion Project has discovered in working with various inventors, is the problem, and we've talked about this on the orionproject.org website, is that most of the inventors who've been, or technicians or engineers who've been working in this alternate energy field, if you will, have low budgets. They're sort of doing this out of their own pocket very often.
Right.
Limited equipment in their own garage or their basement or wherever they're working. And perhaps even more critical is they have little or no access to other people who can help them solve their problems or solve a certain engineering problem. For example, we're working with an engineer right now who's working on a magnetic motor generator technology with us. And we met with him, and he mentioned to us that, and we saw his technology, and I said, this is amazing. The guy is an amazing engineer in terms of designing and building and having built, machining the technology. But he said, when I came to a point where the electronics were, I needed the electronics to add to the mechanical aspect of it, he said to us, I didn't know what to do with this bag of transistors and whatever, electronic parts. And so we said, well, that's fine. We happen to have in our network some people who are exactly what you need, have already worked with this kind of technology, and would be glad to work with you. So we put those two guys together. So one of the roles that the Orion Project is playing is to bring disparate people together from our very large network of inventors and engineers and physicists and what have you, so that if there's a synergistic effect in terms of building things that no individual can build, because for the most part these technologies are complex and rely upon various aspects of engineering and physics.
Right, and what's important for people to understand is that this has never happened in the last 100 years in a non-classified project. It's happened through illegally run projects within the aerospace industry and within the contracting industry, and those things have been kept secret. As Ben Rich said to us before, who was head of Lockheed Skunk Works, said before he died, he said, we already have the technologies to travel among the stars faster than the speed of light, but they're locked away in a black box, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. To which I said that, well, we, the people, need to be the act of God, that God needs to work through us to get these technologies out and to come together and to provide the support, the funding, the logistics, the engineering, the consultants, what have you. And it's really a huge undertaking because we're trying to do this with very, very little funding. And the OrionProject.org has established about a $3 million budget to provide nominal funding to these inventors and engineers. And we really need the public to understand that they're going to have to support that in order for this breakthrough to occur, because the government isn't going to do it. They've done it already, and they've decided to keep it from the people. And these large corporations aren't going to do it because they have these technologies sitting on a black shelf. So what you're saying is exactly right. We have to create this network and pull these folks all together under one roof and provide the support and the funding and the equipment and the fabricating capability and testing facilities and what have you to do this. We know it can be done because, both you and I have seen technologies that are enormously important breakthrough technologies, but trying to get them out to the public is really a big undertaking. And for all the things that are going on in the world, where people spend enormous sums of money on silliness. You hear about people throwing parties that cost $500,000 or $1 million, or somebody in India had a $100 million birthday party or wedding or something, that we need to be able to say, look, can't we come together and support these heroic engineers and scientists like you're talking about, who have been struggling for so long and who have had real breakthroughs but need further support in order to get something robust enough that you could have your home or car running on it that would be free energy. And the payoff to the society would be so huge, the payback, I should say, to the society would be so huge that it's worth this really minimal sort of level of support and funding that we're looking for.
Yes, very good point. And a number of people who are in this field have already suggested that what we really need as a society is a Manhattan-style project. The Manhattan Project was the one that developed the atomic bomb during World War II period. But we really need a Manhattan-style project to focus on these energy technologies because it's a major problem of national security at the highest level. And yet our government is not in a position or is not willing to do that. And so it's really going to be up to the people to do this. What we're doing with the Orion Project is at present, as we've gotten or received some money from donations, we are starting to support some of these projects, the ones that look most promising, at a low level or initial level to get going on this. For example, this example that I just gave you a few minutes ago with this engineer and the electronics person. But in reality, we can speed that process up many-fold by having the various scientists and engineers in the same place, working, bumping into each other on a daily basis. And it's in that kind of environment that you can really spin up things fast because there's a commonality of interaction and excitement that comes from having people in the same place. And this is what our goal is with the Orion Project, is to raise a rather modest amount of money, actually, $3 million or so, to be able to do that. And we feel within a year, 12 to 18 months, with the technologies that we know of already and those that will come out of this environment, that we can have technology that could be do what we wish to do, and that is have something that could be set on a desktop or sit on the floor the size of a large air conditioner or a heat pump or whatever else that could provide energy enough to run a small household.
Well, and exactly, this is what our goal is. Our initial goal, so everyone understands it, is to come up with a very robust system that's in the multi-kilowatt range that's free energy. And by free energy, I mean it's a closed-loop system off the grid that's extracting energy from the environmental, either electromagnetic flux field or an environmental temperature gradient like a heat pump does, that is creating enough energy to run your home and to do so on a reliable basis. I mean, this is our initial objective. We know it can be done because it has been done before. Unfortunately, a lot of these inventions and technologies have been seized illegally. We have about 5,000 such inventions that have been seized at the patent office level and at where they have been issued Section 181s have been seized. I recently had a call from a person who works with a senior member of Congress who is chairman of a very important committee, who some years ago, this person who's very close members with this members of Congress, very close friends with this member of Congress, had been taken to a facility associated with the Oak Ridge National Laboratories, and it was an enormous facility filled with confiscated and experimental devices as these are we're describing, and they are locked away. And this person was utterly stunned that all these solutions to the environmental, global warming, Mideast oil crisis, energy independence issue, environmental issues, world poverty issues are sitting there locked away. And a lot of people think, well, God, this has got to be some kind of urban myth, but it isn't, because we have so many people who have worked in those projects and seen them, and yet they haven't gotten out. The OrionProject.org is a chance for us to all say, enough of that nonsense. It's time for we the people to come together and do it. And we have been very disclosure with the DisclosureProject.org in getting testimony and evidence on illegally run projects. Now it's time for us to actually put a machine together that proves the physics and technology, and we're confident can happen if we get the support. And I think the public has to understand that, well, Ted, you and I went down to this island in the Caribbean where we met a man that had basically a more modern-day version of what we have at the OrionProject.org website, a description of the Stubblefield Earth battery. And it's one of the damnedest things I've ever seen. This guy, of course, never wanted to really cooperate with bringing it out. I think he was variously intimidated and for various other reasons couldn't do it. But we went out there and tested with our own equipment this thing, and he had 6 stakes in the ground and a capacitor and a little wire going from that to this generator that was putting out 400 watts of power, running stereos and fans, anything you want at 110 volts and 60 hertz, just like you plug something into your wall socket. And the only source of energy was that it was using the earth as a resonance field for collecting this electromagnetic energy and running things. Well, it turns out that the guy named Stubblefield did this in 1902 or even earlier, but Nikola Tesla in Stubblefield had taken this to Congress and was demonstrating it to our leaders back in 1902, 106 years ago. And yet here we sit on phones, at least here in Virginia, that are being powered by coal-fired electric plants like in the mid-18 and late 1800s. I mean, this is just plain crazy. If you take a step back from this and think that these kinds of technology breakthroughs have been around for 100 years, and we're still getting 55 or 56% of our electricity in the United States from burning coal, blowing up mountaintops and digging it out of the ground and spewing this nasty stuff into the air and water and destroying the land, when we haven't needed coal or gas or oil since anyone listening to this interview and this radio show was born. There's no one listening to this show who is alive that since we've needed any of these fossil fuels. And you have to begin to ask the question, the big question, why? Well, you know, it's someone's $300 trillion piggy bank of oil and gas and coal that's sitting in the ground, and that's a very powerful group of folks who benefit, but they're killing the earth and strangling the world's economy, and they're going to bring all of us to our knees here real soon if we don't find a solution and bring these things out. So I think the people have to rise up and say, look, this is America. We are innovative and creative. You know, the land of Jefferson, the land of Edison, the land of all these great breakthroughs in technology. Certainly we can come together and form a small campus here near the University of Virginia, a small research facility, and have a dozen or so of these brilliant engineers and scientists working there and come up with a solution. I'm confident we can do it if the public will support it because, you know, Ted, you and I have seen these sort of technologies that have existed, but none of the inventors and engineers that have them have been able to get them up to snuff, as it were, and ready for prime time on their own because they, as you said, they either lack the funding or they lack the expertise to take it to the next level, and that's what we've got to provide for them. I mean, the people have already provided that in classified funding. There's $100 billion a year going into illegal so-called black budget funding. But you know what? Unfortunately, the people in Washington don't want to change that. So what I think we have to do is say, well, we're going to change it, and the people can do so. And one thing that I think folks need to do, and I think this is real important, is that they need to go to the orionproject.org, see what we're doing. There's a budget up there. It's very specific, and it reviews the kinds of technologies we're working on, which we'll talk about a little further. And what we really need to have happen is all of us this week are getting this $600 check from the IRS in addition to our tax refund checks. That's sort of an unexpected windfall that everyone's getting to be economic stimulus. Well, you know, most people are going to go and buy junk at Walmart or put it in a bank account, getting 2 or 3%, and the dollar's becoming less and less valuable every day. It's lost 50% of its value since the euro was launched against the European currency. What I would suggest is that if 5,000 of us who are listening on this World Puja Network right now would take their $600 check and make a donation at the orionproject.org, we would have this budget and could open this facility this summer. And you know, you get a tax deduction from it, but you also, this is funds that nobody was really expecting to get, that Uncle Sam and the great wisdom of the Bush administration and the Congress have decided to send back to us as a way of stimulating the economy, which in and of itself is ludicrous. What's really going to stimulate the economy, in my opinion, is that we combine these little checks we're getting, which really amount to nothing for most people. It barely doesn't even offset the increase in the price of gasoline we have to pay and oil to heat our homes and electric bills. But we take those funds, put it into the orionproject.org, and we collect the means to start true green-collar industries. And by this, I mean the real green-collar industries where we're now making these extraordinary free energy and new energy electromagnetic generators and thermal generators, we'll get into that in a minute, that can run your home and eventually run your car with zero pollution and zero energy costs. I mean, imagine, a lot of people now are spending, between $5,000 and $10,000 a year just on gasoline and heating oil and natural gas for their homes and cars. If you had zero energy costs because the energy was free, once you had one of these devices, which should be no more expensive than a regular generator or heat pump, you'd be able to have no energy costs. So this is a huge breakthrough, and potentially. And I think the only way we're going to get there is to have lots of people combining. So I'm sort of making a challenge here to the listeners that you not expect someone else to do it, but that you sort of say, well, look, I'm going to take this unexpected gift from Uncle Sam that we're all getting this week and turn it over to something that will really make a difference for economic stimulus, but also solve the environmental crisis, because the Earth, Gaia, is a conscious being. She is an awake and conscious being, and she's telling us in so many ways that she's hurting under the strain of the weight we're placing on her, with 6.5 billion people trying to live using the energy systems we have today. And we're basically, one way to look at this is that we have 6.5 billion people trying to live on the Earth using the energy generation technologies that we had in the mid and late 1800s, when there were only 2 billion people on the planet. So I think that it's a crisis that cannot be solved by tinkering around the edges, and we're going to have to come up with these really fundamental new types of solutions. And we know, if you look at the orionproject.org, there's a lot of historical evidence and scientific proof that these technologies have existed, do exist, the science is known, but they've always ended up being sequestered, suppressed, or the inventors in some cases have even been murdered or threatened and intimidated in coming out. So we have to put together a strategic team around this and a security team around it, and combine the greatest minds we can find to solve this problem in a hurry, because time is not on our side. And I think that we have to realize that 150 years of fossil fuel usage is about to catch up with us, and we really have got to find these solutions, and we can.
Absolutely. And one of the problems that we face in this country, and actually globally, is the fact that a lot of the people who are in the present government, the elected government, are not aware of a lot of these technologies, and they are being sort of led down the path, legislatively speaking, to do something. For example, and this is quite a bad example, of the use of adding ethanol to our gasoline.
Yeah, which is taking 3 steps backwards, actually.
Which is absolutely taking 3 steps backward, and I think people who are at least semi-awake can already see the impact of that. And what's happening is that it has caused use of corn mainly for the production of ethanol, which is a food stock for feeding animals, chickens, beef, pork, pigs, etc. And so the impact of taking corn and making ethanol to drive our cars around is having a major impact on our food sources. And coupled with the fact that the price of fertilizers has increased dramatically, several-fold within the past year, is having a potentially major impact on our food structure, not only in the United States but in the world. So anything we do to solve the energy crisis, if you will, in the normal sort of mode, normal thinking of the past 100 years, is going to have major ripple impacts on other aspects of our society. Right now, another example is China plans to build hundreds of new coal-fired plants to produce energy for their burgeoning and blossoming economy in China.
Yeah, they're putting one new coal-fired power plant on without any scrubbers, one a week for the next 10 years.
And the impact of that is such that it's going to increase manyfold the amount of carbon dioxide and other pollutants going into the air, way overwhelming anything that the EPA increasing the gas mileage on cars effect will have as an effect. So it's out of control, and in a sense it's even worse because there are technologies that exist that allow you to put scrubbers on coal-fired or fossil fuel plants that remove the CO2 and allow it to be recycled. That technology already exists, and yet for some reason it isn't in the hands of the people building these. So it's part of our problem is the information transfer from people who have technologies that would increase the energy production and efficiency, and those that are doing it. And it's a communications problem, and it's mainly a desire and willingness problem among these people.
Well, ultimately, it's a corruption problem, and I just cut to the chase on this. I've been doing briefings on these issues for the CIA director and the head of intelligence for the Joint Staff and the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and senior members of the Senate and members of royal families in Europe and on for 15 years. And what I find is that there is a very powerful group of folks, 200 to 300 people, who benefit from the current status quo world order that is based on a centralized, top-down power system, literally power as in energy, and power as in figurative, as in geopolitical power. And they have an enormous amount of clout. They are not afraid to use it, and they're not afraid to launch absurd activities and agendas in order to further that clout. For example, this imbroglio we're in with Iraq. Now, a lot of people think, oh, well, the real secret agenda was that we wanted to go in there and get that oil field. On the contrary, the Iraq government was about to have sanctions lifted by Russia, France, and the United Nations when we invaded them, and they would have started selling oil out of the second largest oil field in the world, and the price of oil at the time of the invasion, which was in around $20 to $30 a barrel, would have gone down to the Clinton-era years of maybe, $12 to $18 a barrel. Now we're looking at $120 a barrel oil because of the instability that's been caused by the invasion and what I consider planned chaos. Now, everybody thinks, Rumsfeld and these people were just plain incompetent. I don't think so at all. I think they're clever as a fox. I think this entire situation we're facing today was a planned, chaotic invasion where they deliberately did not provide the security to get the oil to market so that the price of this stuff would go from $20 to $30 a barrel to $120 a barrel. But guess what? In Saudi Arabia and the other oil-producing areas that are flying high right now, it still only costs $2 or $3 a barrel to pull it out of the ground, but they're selling it for $120 a barrel. Well, gee, wonder who benefits from that little game. Not to mention the $1 trillion military-industrial complex and all the contractors feeding at the trough from this. So what you find is that the American people are bankrolling every time they fill up their tank with gasoline, a bunch of kleptocrats and what I call petro-Nazis that have run the world's geopolitical situation into the ground and the environment into the ground. And I think the only way we're going to change that is to come together and say, enough already. And frankly, it isn't even a matter of education. I have educated people, but you know what? A lot of these powerful folks, Ted, they look at me and they say, yeah, you're right, this needs to happen, but it's too dangerous and I don't want to do it. It's too risky, and I'm taking on the 8,000-pound gorilla sitting there on the corner. But this is why I think, again, the grassroots needs to do it. The reason we're making this appeal on the World Puja Network is, I'm an emergency doctor, and I know an emergency when I see one. Our planet and our civilization is in a serious emergency. And, nothing's going to matter if we don't figure out a way out of this crisis, and we can. The very good news and the message of enormous hope is that, Ted, you and I have seen these technologies. We know guys who've developed them, and we've seen some of them working. But to get them to the point that they're running everyone's home on a reliable basis is an engineering and scientific research and development effort that has got to be funded by someone, and it's got to be supported by someone. Well, the people listening to this show, I got news for you. You're it. It ain't going to be, don't tell me Bill Gates will do it. Don't tell me George Soros will do it. Don't tell me Papa Bush or Baby Bush will do it. Don't tell me the Senate will do it. Don't tell me that Lockheed Martin will do it or Exxon will do it. I have found that it's going to be us, the people. And you know what? Since we're all getting this gift from the government this week, let's pay it forward like the movie, and pay it forward to theorionproject.org. And if we get 5,000 of us that do that, we'll have the budget, we'll put this brain trust together, and I think that within 12 to 18 months, and maybe sooner, we'll have some really amazing technologies that can transform our world, and we will announce that there'll be no power on earth that will stop us. We've done this with the disclosureproject.org. No amount of money and no amount of threats will stop us from getting this out to the people and seeing that the people have a new and wondrous clean source of energy that they can then run their homes and eventually their cars on, and we can have a civilization on earth that is not only clean and not harming the earth, but begins to be just. You know, one of the big problems, as I see it, is that there's no way we're going to have peace in the world. Where can we have peace in the world when you have a system, a zero-sum game of energy and money, where 80% of the world has to be in poverty for the other 20% to live of driving their cars and living in air-conditioned and heated homes? I mean, you just can't have a world like that, because if you do, eventually there's going to be the have and the have-nots clashing. And I think that there's no way for there to be peace without justice, and there's no way for there to be justice with the current power and economic system that is based on oil, gas, and coal and centralized utilities. It all is a very direct line. And this is why not only developing these technologies, but getting them out to the public and disclosing them and recruiting the help of everyone listening. We need everyone's help to do this. There's no way that Dr. Loder and I can do this by ourselves or even with a small team of people. We need everyone putting their shoulder to the wheel on this, because this is the big one. This is the big transition that has to happen to create the foundation for a sustainable and just and peaceful civilization on Earth that then can be here for thousands of years. And I think we're at that point. We're the generation that have that as our sacred obligation and responsibility. Every single person who's alive today has that as the responsibility. And I'm certain we can do it. I mean, I would not have given up my medical career if I didn't think this was completely attainable. And I know it is. And, you know, Ted, of course, you've made enormous sacrifices to do this, which I very much appreciate, and we have many other people. But now it's time for us to ask the public to do so, and that's why we've started this nonprofit, this tax-deductible nonprofit group, and people need to go to the orionproject.org, ORG, because it's a nonprofit, and see what we're doing and help us. And if a lot of small streams together, we can, you know, begin to be this mighty river that moves this project along. And I think we need to collect many, many little rivulets and streams that then begin to make this torrent of power that brings this knowledge and these new technologies to the earth. And one of the goals of the Orion Project is to eventually see that these technologies are gifted to the poor areas of the planet, the areas that are developing where people are living on less than $2 a day, which is almost half the world's population, where they can then begin to have clean water and sanitation and everything like this without having any pollution and without having to put in a multi-trillion-dollar coal or oil-fired electric network like we have in the West. So this is something that we can do, and it's an enormous undertaking. But its transformative effect is, on the one hand, people think of it as a very material thing we're talking about. It's really a very spiritual and sacred obligation for us to take care of the planet, but to take care of the rest of humanity.
Absolutely.
And that's what these breakthroughs can do when they're in the hands of good people the people. Most people are very good people. It's only a few people who become these insanely greedy, violent, nutty people. But most people are wonderful people, as you know. And so we need to collect those folks all together and have this technology supported. And I think that once people understand and get educated, Ted, you've done a great job of putting at the orionproject.org some of the history and scientific material that people can go to and read to see what we're doing.
Right.
And once people understand that, I think they'll support it.
Let me pop in here with a thought before we talk about some of the actual technologies, and that's to take your theme of transformative ideas for global society. There's an impact of what we're doing that is perhaps more subtle or missed by people who just haven't thought about it seriously, and it's the following. Right now, on this planet, I think most people who are awake at all are very aware that we have an energy problem and a problem with our energy and the cost of the energy and the availability of energy for the different peoples of the planet. One of the things that will happen now, once we have a technology, it may take as much as 10 to 20 years for the technology to be broadly accepted and broadly used, so it ultimately does make an impact on our oil usage and our CO2 effluent into the atmosphere, etc. It's going to take a while. This will not happen overnight. I mean, even if I came to you tomorrow and said, hey, I've got a technology that will run your car forever on zero-point energy, Detroit and the rest of the car companies, not so much Detroit these days, make on the order of, in the United States, 20 million plus or minus cars a year, and there's almost 250 million or more cars in the United States. Well, to replace those cars with a new technology would take a minimum of 10 years, probably more likely 15. So it's going to take a while to do that. But if we have a technology that people would say, oh my gosh, we will be able to change the way we use fossil fuels and get off this thing, it will create a buzz and what I call the hope factor. In other words, people will see that there is a pathway out of our non-sustainable, dead-end civilization in terms of our energy technologies. And just creating that hope, even though you can't go down to the store and buy one today, but showing people that there is an alternative way to do things and that the civilization on this planet is not terminal if we have these technologies.
That's right, and people need to understand this is
major hope for the people of this planet.
Oh yeah, and for everyone all over the world to see that where there's a way out of this conundrum, and there is, and that's why this is a message of great hope, and the vision is one that's very hopeful, and and to give people just a real tangible example of this, I've worked for some time and have visited the laboratories of a brilliant physicist who was being funded by one of our military installations to do some of this work. And he had actually worked out the equations and built prototypes that were able to create a sort of anti-gravity lift effect from various voltages and resonance frequencies. And, in fact, what he had, I was told, began to equal the knowledge that was at Lockheed Skunk Works, where they have these things that look like flying saucers flying around. And it turns out that the colonel that had provided the funding to this was visited by some folks when this man became successful and was told to defund the project because it was too successful. Now, this is counterintuitive. Most people think, oh, gee, eureka. But it turned out that they didn't want this other group to know this science. And so they took the funding and stopped it. And so this colonel and the inventor have both met with me to say, look, if you can put the team together, we'll work with you in getting this out there through your group, through the orionproject.org. Now, what's interesting is that, that might be the end of the story, except the most eminent laboratory within the United States government also got the same information from the same inventor, and independently, without him doing it, recreated this device, and it worked. And I have met with the senior-most scientist in the U.S. government that deals with this. And he says, yes, we have all of this, and it's sitting in a vault. Now, here are the taxpayers, and he told me that once they reproduced it and they had these things floating and flying around a hangar, and by the way, this system can be turned into an energy generation system very easily within a 12 to 18-month period. He said their funding was pulled and canceled because there was a compartmented secret group that already had this stuff that didn't want anyone else to have it. And so the white hats in the government and even in the military who want to bring this stuff out keep having their funding cut off. Well, now guess what? We here at the Orion Project and people listening at the World Puja Network can put a sheltering branch of protection and support around this scientist and bring him in and bring in these other scientists who have reproduced this system, and we can recreate this device and create it and configure it into a free energy generating system within a year or so, or at the most 2 years. And why don't we do it? This is not an urban legend. These are people we have met with and who have had real things. And not only that, but the technologies have been reproduced. Well, this is really exciting and good news. But the tragic part of it is that it's sitting there languishing and no one's doing anything with it because it was, quote, too successful. And I think that what we have to realize is that to make this real, to actuate it, to manifest these new sciences, we're going to have to all pull together, and the public are going to have to pull with us.
Well, that's a wonderful example, I think, of the problem that we're in, and the fact that people don't have much hope because all we see right now is solar and wind and ethanol, all of which have their problems. They help the problem around the edge, but they don't really get at the core issue. Right.
Why don't you tell folks about the thermal exchange generator experiments that we're doing with some people and how that might help?
Yeah, maybe this is a good time to go through and talk about some of these technologies that we're looking at. And we classify these technologies into what we term transitional technologies, and then sort of further down the line, more robust, perhaps, breakthrough or brand new technologies. And several of the technologies that we call transitional technologies are those that take known physics, known by your local university and physicists, and or known technologies, and sort of play with them, not exactly play with them, but engineer them to be energy producing. And let me give you an example. It's been known for many years, probably almost a century, about compression and vapor engines or vapor technology, which really runs your refrigerator or runs an air conditioner or runs.
Most people don't realize that those are 4 to 6 times over unity, meaning they put out 4 to 6 times more power than you actually put into them.
Exactly. So you run your refrigerator or you run your heat pump on electricity. It turns the pump, compresses the gases, but it extracts heat from the environment, compresses it, and then you get the heat into the house. So the actual heat that you produce from this technology is 4 to 6 times more than the heat because of this transfer system than you would have if you just ran resistance heating or little hot things in the house to heat the house. So that's a technology that, if it's reversed around a bit, and could actually drive a small generator, which could be designed to provide several kilowatts, up to maybe perhaps 10, to run a house. Now, there are problems with this, and we're working with several teams working with this technology. And, why hasn't it been done well? It's not as easy as one might think, and part of it has to do with the thermal gradients between, say, a hot day outside and sort of a cooling environment. Think about large power plants, which use large thermal gradients in the local ocean or river to cool a lake, to cool down the 500,000 degree steam that comes out of the system. So when you're working with lower temperature gradients, or delta T's as it's called, it requires some trickier thing. But we're working with several teams working on this type of technology, and we'll see whether it can be done. It may be necessary.
Well, actually, we have spoken to people in the past where it has been done, but those technologies end up either being suppressed or bought out and put on a black shelf. And by the way, this is not an urban myth. there was the Jerusalem Post, which is the main language newspaper, English language newspaper in Israel, had an article a couple months ago about a man in Israel who had developed a system that was dealing with water and getting the hydrogen and oxygen out of water on a highly efficient basis. And he was offered tens of millions of dollars by, quote, an oil interest to basically buy it out and put it on a black shelf. And this was in the mainstream press. So, this happens every day. And, the average inventor who comes up with a breakthrough like this, who's struggling to feed his family, if somebody shows up and offers them $30 million or $50 million, they're going to say, Eureka. Well, unfortunately, It ends up in the black pit of Calcutta, never to be seen again. So what we're describing here with this sort of heat pump technology being turned on its head as an electric generator actually has been done, but they end up never getting out there. So this is one thing we think that is viable, that is using known refrigerant and heat pump technology. And I think the other one that's important for us to go into very quickly here before we run out of time is the fact that you can use a type of sophisticated electronics and split hydrogen and oxygen off of water and then burn it as a clean source of fuel, because when you burn it, all you get out of the tailpipe is water vapor, which you can actually condense and put back in through the system. So the energy is enormous potential in water, and every home in America has about 400 gallons of water it consumes, the average home, and most of that is gray water from showers and sinks that could be filtered,
more than one would
run through one of these systems. And what you would have is a water-to-fuel generator that would be running your house for as much power as you need, and eventually your car could be converted this way. And this apparently by Stan Meyer and other people have been done. We're working with some teams now who are experimenting with the electronics, and we don't want to get into the esoterics of the physics, but basically when you normally do electrolysis and split hydrogen and oxygen off of water, it takes a huge amount of electricity, and it's sort of like it's a very good way of creating energy. But if you have these Tesla-type coils and really advanced electronic circuits, you can use very little electricity and get a lot of this hydrogen and oxygen gas out of water on an over-unity basis, meaning you get more power out than you put in, and then you have something where you can have a closed-loop system that would be self-running and run a generator. And this, of course, has been done reportedly by Stan Meyer and his team before he died, and by others. And what we want to do is get the best brains together in the world to recreate those systems and perfect them, because that's something where, look, we've already got millions of generators out there and about 1 billion vehicles on the road. And imagine if all of a sudden your car could be running on the excess water that you have running through your house anyway, by having this kind of electrolysis unit and some additives and some modifications to the engine. Well, your only pollution then would be water vapor, and your only cost would be water that you're already putting into the sewer from your showers and sinks. So this is an enormous breakthrough that could transform our society very quickly, because you don't have to scrap every engine and generator on the planet. So that is something we're working on, and people need to understand that that's a really viable system. But it needs R&D and development to get it to the point where it's going to be strong enough to run your home.
Right. That's the second example of a transitional technology, one that uses existing infrastructure with modifications to enhance our energy production. And in fact, right now there are a number of companies that sell these generators that are not even over unity at this point, but they do increase mileage, gas mileage, and reduce pollution coming out of the tailpipe. So that's a second type of technology. A third type is perhaps a little more esoteric, and that deals with magnetic motors, quote, permanent magnets, that can be used in various configurations to run a motor, which in turn can run a generator, etc. The problem is looping the system and producing excess energy within that system. Under normal conditions, basically the best you can do is kind of 1-to-1. runs a generator, which then puts out power, which runs the motor, and you don't have any excess to run your house. However, there have been some recent breakthroughs, in fact, very recently, using special kinds of magnets called asymmetric magnets, which it appears anyway, will solve that problem. That's another area that we're working with several people on that area, but it's...
Well, and we know that, there are reports that Nikola Tesla, 100 years ago had discovered this phenomenon and had self-running cars and self-running generators because the energy was coming from this, I called it earlier in this show, the zero-point energy field, but others have called it the quantum vacuum flux field. And a lot of people say, what are you talking about? Well, imagine the original hydrogen atom from the Big Bang, if you believe in that theory, which frankly I don't. But let's just say, let's just give the devil their due. And so that's, 15 or 13 billion years ago. Well, the original hydrogen atoms are still there running. How are they running? Well, when you get to the subatomic level, you get these quarks and other subatomic particles that we have found in physics are fluxing in and out of this sort of multipotent energy field, and they're virtual. And you find that all of matter, all of solid matter, is actually fluxing in and out of this baseline energy field at this subatomic level. And that's how a hydrogen atom that's been sitting there spinning around and running for 15 billion years is still going on like the Energizer Bunny. So there's infinite energy all around us, and what these magnetic flux motors are doing is tapping into that field of energy and turning it into electricity.
Right, rotary
and so I'm trying to make it as simple as I can, but it's there for the taking, as Dr. Bearden says. And so, the question is, the theory is known. There are devices we know that have existed that have been confiscated and suppressed and stuck at Oak Ridge or stuck at other places and hidden from the public. The question is, why don't we get together with some of these really fantastic engineers and physicists that we have in our network, put them under one tent, let them work together and do their magic? I'm convinced that within a year or two, we would have some amazing breakthroughs, and the public would then say, gee whiz, we never have to destroy and abuse our beautiful planet again in order to live well. So it's not this question of, do we go back to the Stone Age, or do we live well and cannibalize our beautiful Mother Earth? We can live in peace and in kind of a homeostasis and balance with the Earth, with an enormously abundant society. And one of the implications of this, which we haven't talked about, is that when these energy costs go down to virtually zero, which is what we're talking about here, manufacturing and recycling can be done in a way where there's zero pollution. Right now, a lot of recycling isn't done because the cost of the energy to recycle the stuff is so high, you get to the point of diminishing return. If the energy costs are zero, you can recycle everything, and the Earth can be, every single thing we use can be recycled. We can desalinate water. And as the Bible said, even the desert shall bloom, because the cost of desalination is an energy issue. The chemical and the process of desalination has been known for decades, and there have been some big breakthroughs in desalination. And the water's, 2/3 of the planet's covered with oceans. No shortage of water. There's shortage of potable water, drinkable water, water for irrigation. And so when you see these technologies, they're going to be these secondary and tertiary and quaternary ramifications that are so huge and exciting, because now we're talking about the Earth becoming a veritable rose garden of abundance at the same time that we're not harming the environment at all. So this is what's so exciting about these kinds of breakthroughs, and why I'm convinced that we really have an opportunity now, maybe once in 1,000 years, to make this kind of big leap forward.
And I might add, this is that time. Time is very short in terms of the world political situation on these issues, because right now we're in the Middle East with major problems. The war machine is rumbling relative to Iran right now, and it's because of energy. And
sure.
the view that...
I mean, the only reason we're camped out in the Middle East, look, we're not there because we like the date palms and the camels. We're there for oil. Let's just get blunt. And when people, when you hear the politicians in Washington say, gee, our strategic national security interest in the Middle East, what they're talking about is oil. And so, we have an entire foreign policy built around our addiction, to use Bush's term, of oil. Well, let's get off of it. And we're not going to get off of it by throwing billions of dollars to Archer Daniels Midland, ADM, by doing ethanol or any of these other harebrained, stupid things that we're doing. I mean, let's get real. I mean, the fact is we have all the solutions. And the beautiful thing is that the mind of the cosmos, if you want to look at this with the universal intelligence, has brought through the minds of men and women for 100 years these amazing solutions, but they've been cut off, blocked by these corrupting interests. Now it's time for the people to learn about this, unite together around a project, fund the research, and support the disclosure of these technologies, and we will see a completely transformed world. And you're not going to fix the problem by just kvetching about it. You're going to need to actually go out there and create the solutions, and that's what we're doing at the orionproject.org, and we're really urgently asking everyone listening to go to that website. It's all one word, theorionproject.org, and see what we're doing and contribute what you can, whether it's, your refund, your check from the IRS and this unexpected windfall or any amount, or if you know someone who is can provide a larger grant. We have one person who works with us who's on our board who has pledged $250,000 if the rest of the community of people concerned with the environment and Gaia and energy will contribute the rest. So we really are asking for folks to help us and to go to the site and be educated also on not only the history of this issue and the suppression of it, but also the really promising types of technologies. I mean, some of it gets into a lot of physics that may make people's eyes glass over, but the bottom line is that the energy of the universe is infinite, and it's all around us, and it can be tapped into, and we have the knowledge to solve these problems. And I'm a doctor. I'm not someone who's a mechanical or electrical engineer or physicist, but the people who do know this, that we've identified through a lot of hard work over the last, 11 years that Ted and I have been working together on this problem, are ready to step forward and help us come up with these solutions. And now we're asking the public to join with us in doing it.
Yes, on that website, the orionproject.org, there's a section called Research, and in that section there is a number of research papers, both policy and research papers that you can go to learn more about some of these technologies and flesh out your ideas on things.
Right, and I think it's really important for people to understand that this is something we can do this year. I mean, this is not something where, maybe in 10 or 20 years there'll be fusion or something like this. We're talking technologies. We're standing on the shoulders of other giants in the field of electromagnetics and research who have worked on this, some of them for 40 and 50 years of their lives, who are now willing to contribute to this effort. So we're not starting at zero. This is the other good news about what we're doing. We've identified the people who have a track record, as I mentioned, the scientists who have been funded through our tax dollars and through the military who had his project stopped because he was successful. We have the benefit of all of those people that we've identified, and we're very excited that many of them want to join with us here and form a campus and do this work together, where there'd be the synergy and the sharing and the collapsing of time frames, where you'd have this quickening of potential, because you'd have all these people who, frankly, have never had a chance to even meet each other in many cases, get together and work under one roof and really do their magic. And I think that this is why it's so exciting what the Orion Project is doing, because it has enormous implications for the Earth, and I hope all of you will join us in this great effort.
Yes, thank you for your support and interest, and together we can make this possible, make it happen. Steve, thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank everyone for being with us here on the World Fusion Network. This is Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and we will be with you again in a couple of more weeks, and we look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks so much, Ted.
Thank you.